What if analysts declared something geopolitically impossible? And then, within weeks, events on the ground began moving in exactly the opposite direction. That is the question at the center of today's video. And the answer, if the reports coming out of the region are accurate, could represent one of the most significant shifts in Middle Eastern security architecture in a generation. Stay with me, because this story involves nuclear-armed states, shifting alliances, a reported military escalation involving Iran, and a small country that most Western analysts weren't even watching, suddenly sitting at the center of the entire geopolitical chessboard. I'm going to walk you through all of it, step by step, in plain language. This is Strategic Dynamics Edge. If you're new here, this channel is dedicated to breaking down complex global power shifts in a way that actually makes sense. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell right now. These stories develop fast, and you don't want to catch up a week late. Before we go any further, I need to be clear. This video is analytical in nature. It draws on open source reporting, commentary from regional analysts, and publicly available geopolitical assessments as of mid-2026. Some of the events discussed, particularly the diplomatic contacts, reported deployments, and ceasefire discussions, are still being reported on, and not all details have been independently verified by all major outlets. This analysis also includes projections and scenario-based interpretations drawn from emerging regional reporting. We are not presenting any of this as settled, confirmed history. We are doing what this channel always does, analyzing what the available reporting suggests and what it could mean if accurate. With that framing clearly stated, let's get into it. In early February 2026, a well-regarded analyst published a piece in the Asia Times with a title that seemed to put a debate to rest once and for all. The piece was called "The Myth of an Islamic NATO." The argument was methodical. It laid out, point by point, why a NATO-style military alliance among Muslim-majority states was structurally unworkable. Pakistan's military, the piece argued, operates under significant American financial and institutional pressure. Saudi Arabia's defense architecture was built around American hardware and American bases. Turkey remained a full NATO member. Egypt was dependent on Gulf aid and IMF support. These were not, the analyst concluded, the building blocks of an independent security bloc. These were states whose defense relationships ran through Washington, not around it. The piece was published on February 5th, 2026. What happened in the weeks that followed is what makes this story worth telling. According to multiple regional analysts and media reports, the United States and Israel carried out strikes against Iran in late February. The precise details and full scope of those operations remain subjects of ongoing analysis, but the diplomatic and strategic consequences that followed were significant and, by most accounts, swift. Reports from regional media outlets and geopolitical analysts described a series of diplomatic meetings that began taking shape almost immediately. Meetings that, if the reporting is accurate, brought together the foreign ministers of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Pakistan in a format that had reportedly never occurred before. 4 countries, 1 table, discussing a shared strategic response to a rapidly changing regional environment. To understand why this combination of countries matters, and why Western analysts were reportedly caught off guard by the speed of these developments, you have to understand the assumption that has shaped American Middle East strategy for decades. The assumption, broadly stated, was this: the Gulf states depend on American military protection, American weapons, and American diplomatic cover to such a degree that they will ultimately defer to American strategic preferences, even when those preferences create friction with Gulf interests. Saudi Arabia might express concern, it might call for de-escalation in carefully worded diplomatic language, but when the moment of real decision arrived, the conventional wisdom held, Riyadh would fall in line with Washington. It always had. That assumption, according to regional analysts quoted in outlets like New Lines Magazine and Al-Ahram Online, took a significant hit during the conflict. Here is the reported sequence of concerns that Gulf governments began voicing, according to analysts familiar with discussions inside the region. When Iranian retaliation came in response to the initial strikes, it reportedly targeted infrastructure across several Gulf states, including airports, energy facilities, and military installations. American air defense systems, according to reports, intercepted some of those attacks, but not all. Analysts noted that American military priorities during this period appeared focused on protecting American forces and assets in the region. From the perspective of Gulf governments, according to those familiar with quadrilateral discussions reported by regional media, the concern was this: they were hosting American military forces, they were absorbing Iranian retaliation as a direct consequence of that hosting relationship, and the protection they were receiving did not match the exposure they were taking on. One analyst, quoted by Al-Ahram Online, summarized the reported Gulf view this way: Saudi Arabia realized it cannot rely solely on U.S. protection. When Iran responded by targeting American assets in Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, it became clear that the primary focus was on protecting certain interests, not the region as a whole. Now, analysts are careful to note that this represents one reading of events, and Washington would likely frame the same situation very differently. What matters for our analysis is that this perception, whether fully accurate or not, appears to have shaped the diplomatic decisions that followed. There's also important context that predates the reported regional escalation. In September 2025, Saudi Arabia reportedly formalized a mutual defense agreement with Pakistan. Analysts pointed to the India-Pakistan military standoff earlier that year as a significant factor. During that standoff, Pakistan's military performance drew attention in defense circles, with claims made, and some partially acknowledged, about the effectiveness of Pakistani air defense capabilities against a larger adversary. Regional security experts quoted by New Lines magazine suggested that Saudi Arabia drew a conclusion from that episode. It wanted a defense partner with demonstrated combat capability and a nuclear deterrent, one whose strategic interests aligned more directly with Saudi Arabia's own, and whose partnership did not come attached to the political conditions that American defense relationships typically carry. With that context in place, the reported diplomatic activity that followed the Iran strikes becomes easier to understand. According to multiple regional outlets and geopolitical analysts, diplomatic contacts between Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Pakistan accelerated significantly between March and May of 2026. Reports describe quadrilateral meetings of foreign ministers, in Riyadh, then in Islamabad, then at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum in Turkey. Pakistani media and defense analysts reported the deployment of Pakistani military personnel to Saudi Arabia under the terms of the bilateral defense agreement, though the exact figures and operational scope were described differently across different sources. Reports also emerged of preliminary diplomatic engagement with Qatar about the possibility of a broader arrangement, and of Turkish defense cooperation discussions with Saudi Arabia involving advanced aerospace systems. Analysts studying this pattern described what appeared to be an emerging security architecture, not a formal alliance in the NATO sense, but a consultative and coordination mechanism that allowed these four countries to align their positions before engaging with other parties, including Washington. The significance of that, if accurate, is hard to overstate. The traditional American approach to managing regional relationships has often relied on bilateral engagement, dealing with each Gulf state separately as the central hub of all regional relationships. A lateral coordination mechanism among these states, if it develops into something durable, would mean that Washington increasingly faces pre-coordinated positions rather than individual partners. It can engage separately. Whether that is a threat or simply a natural evolution of regional politics depends entirely on who you ask. What makes this particular combination of countries analytically interesting is how complementary their respective capabilities reportedly are. Saudi Arabia brings financial depth, sovereign wealth funds, oil revenue that reportedly benefited from elevated prices during the Hormuz disruptions, and significant defense procurement budgets. Turkey brings a growing defense industrial base, combat-proven drone technology, naval systems, and, according to analysts, a defense industry expanding at roughly 20% annually. Pakistan brings manpower, institutional military depth, and a nuclear deterrent. Qatar, if it joins a formal arrangement, would bring logistics infrastructure and a sovereign wealth fund ranked among the largest in the world. Each element functions independently, but assembled and coordinated, analysts suggest they could produce something more strategically significant than any one of them could achieve alone. The question is whether the specific conditions of 2026, the shared experience of the reported regional military escalation, the demonstrated inadequacy of the existing security guarantees, the personal and institutional relationships that have developed among these governments, are durable enough to overcome the structural obstacles that defeated every previous attempt. The honest answer is that nobody knows yet. What can be said with more confidence is this. Multiple outlets reported that these diplomatic contacts and meetings took place. The defense agreement between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan is documented across regional and international reporting. The broader trend toward Gulf states seeking greater strategic autonomy from Washington has been developing for years and appears, according to most analysts covering the region, to have accelerated. Whether this becomes something institutionally durable, or whether it fragments under the weight of competing national interests the way its predecessors did, is a question that the next 12 to 24 months will begin to answer. What we can analyze today is the pattern, and the pattern suggests that the Middle East's security architecture is in a period of genuine, significant transition. The states involved are not breaking from Washington. They are not forming an explicitly anti-American alliance. What they appear to be building, based on available reporting, is a supplementary structure. One that gives them options, gives them leverage, and gives them the ability to say to any outside power, we are capable of managing our own security. That capability changes the negotiating dynamic, even if the relationships themselves remain intact. The myth of an Islamic NATO was declared impossible just weeks before events began moving in a very different direction. Whether what is emerging fits that label, or something more nuanced, is a debate that serious analysts are only beginning to work through. What is clear is that this is worth watching closely. because the decisions being made in Riyadh, Islamabad, Ankara, and Cairo right now will shape the region for years to come. If this video gave you a perspective worth thinking about, share it with someone who follows geopolitics. And drop your analysis in the comments. Do you think this framework has the staying power to change the regional order? Or will it follow the historical pattern and fracture? I genuinely want to know what you think. Like the video if it added value, and subscribe to Strategic Dynamics Edge so you don't miss what comes next. This story is still developing, and we'll be covering it every step of the way.